On this month's First Person podcast, I sat down with Rob, Chris, and Elise, and we discussed Love Nikki-Dress Queen. In particular, we talked about its free-to-play mobile gaming model, how it integrates with Facebook and social media platforms, the kind of personal play styles and metagaming elements that the game allows, and we also talked about the difficulties in localization efforts and the kind of cultural appropriation and cyber-tourism that we see in this game. Love Nikki-Dress Queen is a mobile game that you play as a young woman named Nikki who is transported through unknown means into this sort of parallel universe. And upon reaching this world, Nikki, whose interest in fashion and styling her clothes and all of that, is suddenly taken to a whole new level because people in this world primarily interact through style competitions. You meet somebody, you'll speak, and then you challenge them to basically a dress-up fight. When you see Nikki in, I wouldn't say cutscenes because there's still shots, but when you see Nikki, she is a tall, thin, lighter-skinned woman with pink hair, and she's very nice and sweet-looking, usually wearing a sort of pink dress. And in gameplay, in these dress-up battles, you pick different hair and different dresses and suits and pants and shoes, and you basically can entirely change her appearance. And that is how you, in fact, compete in this game, whether you're doing that against other Nikkis, other players, or if you're doing that against characters within the game itself. There's a PvP arena, there's a voting arena where it's like players vote on each other's outfits, there's a crafting workshop, there's a store, there's a stylist association where it's basically like a guild where you join with other players that you may or may not know to accomplish specific quests and tasks. And then there's also like the kind of gambling elements, the slot machine, so to speak. Hi, I'm Betsy Bray. You can find me at Betsy Bray.
I'm Elise Vist, and I'm on Twitter at Visticuffs.
I'm Chris Lawrence. You can find me on Twitter at QuipsLawrence.
I'm Rob Parker. You can find me on Twitter at RobotParking.
And today we are starting off our new year for the First Person podcast talking about a game called Love Nikki-Dress Queen. It's, I would say, a fashion RPG with gambling elements, for a lack of a better word, and a massive free-to-play model that has not really been necessarily free for a lot of us.
Yeah, how much has your household, Rob?
Okay, listen, I cannot speak for my partner. There have been multiple conversations in which they have said something to the effect of, I have spent too much money on this game. I cannot, I've spent some money, but it's been pretty restrained, I think. All things considered.
I'm not here to shame. I've spent money on this game.
No one's shaming here. I think everybody but Quips here has paid money for this game. And maybe we should describe this a little bit more. I said it's a dress-up RPG. How would you all describe it? Like the main gameplay mechanics are there's a story. It exists.
There's lore.
Yeah.
Lore, capital O in the lore. But I don't understand the story. I'm uninterested in it, which is a terrible thing for somebody who studies narrative entirely. And you play as a girl named Nikki, and you're in this weird parallel universe where when you meet people, you have a dress-up fight. You put on clothes and compete to see whose outfit is better.
I don't know if I would really call it an RPG, although it certainly has the mechanical elements of it. But
it's also like a loot grind.
Yeah, loot grind, strategy game, because you've got to, learn the rules really specifically and sort of internalize those rules before you can speed through the game. So, I mean, RPG, yes. But
I was saying RPG because of the heavy grinding elements. Like, I've spent weeks trying to get a particular piece of clothing to craft, and yes, this game has crafting.
So I came to this game because of Janine Hawkins writing a thing for Waypoint about Love Nikki-Dress Queen, and how it, on the one hand, is riddled with all of the worst kind of tendencies for free-to-play games, but still seems to be remarkably generous. Even if you don't, like, if you are very careful about how you spend your resources, you can kind of get a fair bit out of the game without putting a dime into it. But part of what kind of hooked me was actually the story and the fact that individual items of clothing have descriptions on them that are very similar to Dark Souls, and that it's like world building through these different individual items, and some of them are like deeply troubling.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, very weird.
Momo, why is your nose bleeding?
Yeah.
I don't want to think about cat erections.
Well, I wasn't thinking about them. Now we all are.
That's what that means, right?
Yes,
the
that is
anime
what that
trope.
means. And
When your nose
Momo-
is bleeding, it's because you're massively turned on.
Yes, and
Yeah.
Momo is
I didn't
a
realize
cat.
that actually just meant erection. I thought it was just you were lusting after someone. Is that actually a physiological? Okay, you know,
I
that makes
assumed
sense.
that's what it was.
In
Maybe
every
I just-
anime I've seen, and I mean that's not an extensive anime knowledge. It's like that's what it has represented. But I'm sure somewhere somebody is listening to this and being like, "Well, actually,
It is a troubling Venn diagram, to say the least.
I like Momo a lot.
So what is okay? Can we at least context? So someone's never
Yes.
played this game.
Yeah.
What is a Momo?
What is a
What
Momo?
what does a
What is a
Momo
Momo?
do?
Momo is your side sass character. He is a small cat who I think he's taught you to be a clothes stylist and how to wear your clothes. And when you do well, he congratulates you, and when you do poorly, he gives you the grades, which. You know, this masculine figure who is also a cute cat is the one judging you all the time.
yeah.
You know, an impressionable, innocent young woman. He's your adorable sidekick, basically, and he makes comments like, "I'm starting to fall in love with you. You have the perfect appearance for a cat," and I'm like, I definitely don't.
Yeah,
I'm
I definitely get that one.
I'm definitely like a tall, skinny anime girl wearing various forms of clothes. But the description I was talking about, where it's Momo, why is your nose bleeding, is a bikini bottom labeled mature and sexy.
Oh,
Right?
Okay.
And that's all the flavor text says.
Yeah, I like the general conceit of you are in this world, and basically almost any form of human interaction is governed by having a fashion battle.
Yes.
Yep. Love it.
I think that's a very beautiful thing. I was drawn to this in part because of what Janine Hawkins wrote, to call back to something I talked about 2 minutes ago. But also, like, I have a weird relationship with mobile games. And so around the same time that I kind of downloaded this, I got lumped into this horrible hell game of Subterfuge with some people from Waypoint. And that game was horribly stressful, to the point where I would play Subterfuge or I'd look at Subterfuge and then anxiety at Subterfuge. And then I would like duck out of that game and then immediately go and boot up Love Nikki and play it for increasingly longer periods of time. The more this Subterfuge game went on, I would need like a half an hour or 20 minutes of Love Nikki just to decompress, which is weird.
Yeah.
I think, because Love Nikki is still like kind of a stressful or like intense game to think about, or like stuff to there's a lot of stuff to juggle and think about and work through.
Yeah,
I think my favorite thing is like trying to explain Love Nikki to someone who hasn't played it and be like, yeah, so there's this where you go and it's the story and you dress up in clothes and you compete against the AI.
computer. Yeah.
But then you can compete against other players, and then you can go into a stylist association where you compete in this other way, and then you make clothes, and then you decompose clothing to get ingredients for other clothes
To
and
make
it's
new
just
clothes.
like, I don't quite understand how I internalized all of the very complicated mechanics, because you often have to go to like 5 different places
Yeah.
in order to craft an item or in order to complete a quest. And it's like, I'm not quite sure when I learned this, when I learned the grammar of Love Nikki, but it's...
I believe that is precisely what gives the game staying power for
Yeah.
me, right?
Yeah.
Because you have your typical tap and wait game where you've got a free currency and you've got a premium currency. And
Right.
inevitably you run out of the premium currency and you either stick it out and keep waiting, or you get bored, which ultimately in the end you get bored, you stop playing, you move on to the next game.
Yeah.
Now, what Nikki, I think, does differently is it juggles like 15 or so different premium currencies, which on paper is intimidating,
Yeah.
right? And you're like, how am I going to make sense of this? But what actually happens once you get sucked into the system is that there's always something you can do. There's always some amount of premium currency that you've trickled down enough to buy a new gown or a new hat or a new accessory. So even if you're playing for free, there's always something to do.
Yeah. Because you are still playing for free, right?
Yes.
Well, it's something that I think about a lot in terms of like, so Destiny, the Destiny developers kind of talked about like a lesson that they solved, or a lesson that they learned, essentially, that this game's not an MMO, blah, 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 blah. But one of their things was, yes, people are going to hit the cap to the things that you can do in this game, and then they're going to go away from this game, and we're going to eventually release new content for it, or we're going to do another thing. And so their goal was not to try to constantly churn out MMO level stuff for people to do, but to basically give players like a really positive feeling about the game, so that when they left and came back to it, they would like be rejuvenated, or they want to come back to that game because they have that
Yeah.
lingering good vibe from that game. And I feel like a lot of free-to-play games are just, we need to keep this person churning through this stuff constantly, and at a certain point feel like slowly apply that pressure to give us money.
Yeah.
And I feel like Love Nikki, on the other hand, has been like incredibly generous. As someone
Yeah.
who does, like, I come in, I do my daily check-in sometimes. Sometimes I don't actually feel like churning through the story. I'm far behind, I think, everyone on this story, and I've been playing this game long before anyone else did. I've put a lot of time into this game. It's been a comforting presence in my life. Here's $5, sure. Give me this cool outfit. Give me the fox thing.
Oh, that was
I
15.
missed out on the
That was
Fox
not.
thing.
Was it?
Yeah,
that was $9.
$15 outfit.
Was it 15?
Yes.
Yeah, it
Oh my
was
God.
15.
That's why I don't have it, because
Yeah,
I was like,
same.
I have probably spent $15 in this game, but I have not dropped it all at once, and somehow that makes me feel
I
okay
thought it was
about it.
less than that.
No.
Oh, Lord. Oh, no. Oh, no.
You could have had a whole Super Mario run.
Although I will say that in terms of the sort of free-to-play dynamics, I do feel like recently there's been a significant uptick
Yeah.
in
Yep.
the, like, because now that like gift box thing that is not a gift box, it's a spend money on this set of items, that shows up every day, whereas it was not every day like even 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So I think there's probably been a significant increase in people playing, and now a significant increase in the ways they try to get money from you. But that gift box, yeah, sometimes it's $15.99, and that's too much for me. But I don't have a real person job. If I had a real person job, I would have bought it. So no shame.
The fox is really super
It's
cool.
a good
so
fox.
Cool. It has 9 tails. Do
It's
you know how I know that?
enormous.
The quiz. Because that's another thing this game does, right?
Yeah.
It quizzes you about its lore that is found on equipment pieces, and
Equipment
Lord.
pieces that
So
sometimes
amazing.
you can sometimes only get these equipment pieces through complete gambling. I started playing mobile games actually it was just when Pokemon Go came out. I had never played mobile games before that, and I looked for bits and pieces between Pokemon Go to, occupy my time, and I've gone through a lot of them, and I've always made a game out of not spending money in these games. And then the super gothy outfit showed up, and I was like, $5 won't hurt.
But I mean, it really doesn't. When I do
No.
think about how much time I've spent playing this
Yeah.
game, because I started playing maybe 2.5 months ago because Elena Cole, who's the founder of Queerly Represent Me, wrote a piece about Love Nikki and dress-up games. And I think the other game was Covet Fashion, which I've also
Okay.
started playing, which is not as good as Love Nikki. But it has real fashion.
I don't want real fashion.
I know. I want
want
ridiculous
foxes.
outfits.
I want foxes with
so
9
she
tails.
she wrote about how fun it is to play this game and how much of a shame it is that there are probably people who either won't play the game or are ashamed to play the game
Yeah.
because of its dress up skin, which that's all it is essentially, because otherwise it's like a strategy game, a fighting game, because that's another part we didn't explain.
Oh my God!
The-
Yeah,
Yeah,
the,
there's
like
skills.
timed.
you have to read your opponent on like the AI opponent, and they'll throw out a snarky comment, and that'll reduce your score.
So you have to be ready to protect yourself against the snark.
Yeah,
Like-
it's
Then you can smile and be extra dazzling or be charming.
And those increase your points, but I mean, you can also put your opponent to sleep, or
You could also
like
steal their shoes.
Yeah,
steal their shoes or their socks.
Yeah. Yeah. You can put them to sleep. I think that's it, though.
That's significant, though, and I
Yeah.
think there's some very
and
uncomfortable.
there's a
parallels to
defense
talk
for
about.
each of them.
Yeah.
Which is pretty amazing.
I mean, that's Oh, and you can only pick 4 skills at any given time, so you better hope your opponent isn't going to steal your socks, your shoes, and put you to sleep if you're trying to boost your score.
You can level those up with gold.
Yeah.
Yep.
with one of the currencies.
Yes.
One of the 80. It's not actually 80. I'm exaggerating
It's like
slightly.
10.
It's at least 10 currencies. I'm not going to try to
No.
count them. We're not. No, don't look at me like we're going to try to name out all
no,
the
no.
currencies.
Does anyone have? So sometimes there are time limited events where it's like, hey, do this thing, or like, hey, there's this special story mission where you can kind of do your best. You don't really have the guidance or scaffolding that you do in the princess mode or maiden mode. Sorry.
Yeah.
And so they had a time limited one where they had like kind of like nursey
The
uniforms.
doctors.
The doctor uniforms.
Yeah.
I
I
didn't think-
desperately wanted that skeleton.
Yeah, Because he's just like a spooky bro that hangs out behind you, and like it occupies an item slot on your person that isn't used all that often. And I keep seeing these people with like spooky skeleton bro, and I started playing as that event was going on, and I didn't understand what it was asking me to do, and I thought it was for people who were good at the game. So I didn't even try, and I am upset. I am bummed about that.
I am retroactively mad. Every now and then I pull up that outfit and I look at it. I was like, how do I get this? It's like, this is currently not available. And I'm like,
You're like,
God damn you. And this, I know it's going to show up as like a give us money for it.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh.
yeah, and I probably that's had an unfortunate side effect for me, because then when I see things that are cool, I want them because I know they'll go away. It has taken all of my self-control and several conversations with my partner to not buy the $15 Fox. I look at him and I'm like, tell me I should not buy this. And he's like, you should not buy that. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like, I don't need the Fox that I'm still staring at, sadly.
And we'll all know when you break.
I know. Because I'm going to put it in every outfit.
The competition theme will be like completely like nothing related to animals at all. That's the theme.
Yep.
And you'll still have a fox.
That is how you will all know, because it actually, I got to that point with the tiny cat bats. That was I broke for the cat bats. I was like, it is $1 to buy these cat bats and some diamonds, and I need this in my life.
I regret nothing.
I know.
I've had a different experience, and I'm not sure if there's just something peculiar going on with my play experience, but I'm not a creature of restraint. Like, when there's a PSN sale, I just accumulate 10 more so odd, like, uncomfortable JRPGs that I don't want anyone to actually see in my collection.
How's Monster Monpiece treating you?
Oh, goodness. But there's such an overabundance of content in Nikki constantly being thrown at us that I'm not even from a financial standpoint, I'm not willing to put enough time into the game to see it all, that I just have to let stuff pass me by and wash over me. I look at the wardrobe collection, there are thousands upon thousands of individual pieces, and I know I'm never going to get them all. I know I'm never even going to come close, and I've just kind of made my peace with that, which is weird for me because I have a fairly completionist play style in games. But with Nikki in particular, I've gotten to the point where I'm just happy to play it in the moment.
What do you think? Is it just because it's so big? Like, in the same way I've accepted I'm not going to catch all the Pokemon in Pokemon Go because I'm not going to walk that much. Is it just I'm good with this, or is there something about the game in particular, do you think?
I think it's a couple different factors. Part of it is perhaps the social factor to it.
Yeah.
I get more just out of the sense of community I get playing with my friends than collecting rare items. So I'm not like loot hungry in this game in the way that I would be playing Diablo or Destiny or something like that.
That's interesting.
I'm also glad that you found peace.
Can I ask what level you're in?
My character's level 25, and I think I'm less than I'm on chapter 5, I think, so I'm less than halfway through.
I don't think I started spending money until like chapter 6 or 7.
Probably. That was just when I hit a point where I wanted to be able to make a different outfit than the cute, lively one I'd been making the whole time.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see like as you progress, but I also wanted to spend a long time playing. So like I've gotten now to the point where it's like, okay, well, I got to do my Love Nikki. There's like an hour of my day gone of just crafting these things. And occasionally, so if you get to a high enough level, you can, rather than play through the competition, just speed through it by clicking what's the button called?
Done 5 or
Done 5, yeah.
Done 10 and done 3. My whole, like, so when you say like 3,000 stamina, I'm like, oh, that's like 5 minutes. Yeah.
But I feel bad doing that. I like going into the game and doing it, but sometimes I'm like, no, I just need this outfit so that I can complete this other quest. So I'm going to done 10 all of these, but I prefer to take my time to go through and play it.
Yeah.
But that might be a consequence of the fact that I've spent money on the game. So now I'm like, well, I got to play this game.
Yeah. Well, I also feel like as my wardrobe collection grows, it becomes less and less wieldy, like in terms of...
Oh, yeah.
I need to take those times to really work through everything that I've got so that I understand what I have in there. But sometimes I'll just use the search function because I'm like, oh yeah, Momo, what should I wear? Okay, thank you, Momo.
That brings me to, I kind of want to respond to an earlier point you made about Nikki as stress relief, right? And I find that the further I get into the game, the more I have two different kinds of like Nikki play days, right? There's the sign-in grindy day where
Yeah.
it's very low impact, low effort. I sign in, I run the slots.
Do your dailies.
Yeah, I do my dailies, and it's a 5-minute experience for me. And then there's
Yeah.
the days where I'm willing to commit the energy and actually start putting new outfits together for new levels or engaging in new competitions. And I'm finding that I'm having fewer of the days where I'm willing to make progress in the actual competitions as my wardrobe accumulates, and I find I have to rely more heavily on search tags and other unwieldy interfaces.
Yeah, the interface is quite interesting, and I frequently get stuck in a search menu I don't mean to be in. I can't scroll through everything. I don't know how you would play this game, aside from just grabbing the first rarest item and putting that on Nikki every time. Then you keep making the same outfit over and over, right?
Yeah.
So the menus suck, but also not using the menus suck.
Yeah. Does anyone like try to create an ensemble, or are they going for kills?
Depends.
I like to play where the outfit I put together actually looks nice. But I'm starting to go back to the beginning, and I'm playing through to try and like increase my score and all that kind of stuff. And that's where I'm putting on, I think about you a lot, Rob, because you talk about like constraints and like voluntary constraints. Wasn't
Right.
that
Yep.
your FPS article?
Yeah.
I do that sometimes. And in the competitions,
Yeah.
in the competitions, I prefer to put an outfit together that I think really looks good
Yeah.
rather than just has a cool, rare thing.
Yep.
And that's how I vote. But if I just want to like slide through a narrative
Yeah.
arc, then screw it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Simple, lively, everything simple, lively.
Yeah, I'll do that for the narrative pieces too. But like, I really, really enjoy the player vote system. There's a competition where the game gives you a theme, and you have to. You don't have to, I suppose, but you know players try to meet that theme, and it's not based on an AI score. It's just players vote for the outfit that they prefer, and sometimes that ends up being look at my fox.
Look at my fox whose tail blocks out the
Yeah.
other person.
I always vote for the person who gets hidden behind
Yeah.
when that happens.
So
I'm like,
the
fuck a fox.
visuals of this competition is there's two Nickies standing side by side, dressed up by two separate players, and the way that they get put side by side doesn't leave enough room for all the backgrounds that exist. So some backgrounds, like the fox,
Yeah.
or accessories like the angel wings, will actually cover up the other person's outfit, and
Yeah.
that's pretty upsetting.
I spite vote a lot that way.
Yep.
Yep.
I did find out eventually that if you tap
Yeah.
No
player,
way.
Yeah, you
that
can
player
tap.
will come to the foreground.
But
you
I'm
can
still
get a look at
spiteful
both.
about the whole
Yeah.
thing. Like,
That's
Yeah.
nice.
yeah, but
It's-
it's still like a problem. I think it's a problem.
It's still as obnoxious as almighty hell when someone has those giant angel wings for no reason whatsoever other than to catch your eye.
I feel so attacked right now. He is staring right at me.
He's taking his hat off and everything.
I think it does a fantastic job of teaching a pretty complex system of allowing players to play in the way that most appeals to them and doesn't force you to spend money, although it certainly hopes that you spend money.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
But
fun.
I never feel, I mean, I feel guilty when I spend money because I'm like, I need to feed myself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
But I don't feel as though I've been cheated when I spend money. I feel like it's earned.
I can see there's sometimes events that come up now, especially having seen a few of them come through. Like I can see where there's like there are very clear drains that have been added into, and then also
Yeah.
like some taps. Like the last what was it where you were I think trying to get the bridge. I think it's still going on now.
Yeah,
where you're
it
trying to
ended
get the knots.
yesterday.
The wish knots.
Yeah, where you're trying to get the wish knots, and it was just very clear that they just wanted you to drop a bunch of diamonds in there.
Yeah,
And-
because you
and
got
the-
more wish knots, which are the currency to buy this special outfit by spending diamonds.
the
which are
premium
different
currency. We should add that you can't purchase all of the currencies. You do have to flat out earn some of them. You can buy some stamina or some, the light blue star coins. But for the most part, the currency that you can buy are these pink diamonds, and you can use them to do a lot of things, but you can't use them to get everything. You can't pay to win the whole thing, right?
Which seems smart, Even
Yeah.
though
Yeah.
like it's saving me from myself, because sometimes there are points where I'm looking at stuff going like, oh, I need these star coins or I need whatever, and I'm like,
Yeah.
can't I just give you money? I just want this thing.
Exactly. I have thought about that, and I was like, don't. And you can't anyway, so stop thinking about it.
Yeah. What I like about it, I think, is that it cuts against a lot of mobile game orthodoxy. Like having kind of worked with some local mobile game companies in various capacities, like how they kind of handle monetization and all the strategies that they kind of use, and played a few other mobile games and stuff like that. Seeing that stuff and then seeing how many things that Love Nikki does that like kind of rub up against this sort of established, like, this is what we do. If you want X amount of dollars to fall out of your player base, you need to do this thing. And Love Nikki's like, what if we did this other thing instead?
I think that's partially one of the reasons why I actually have paid to play this game, because I've never done that. I played like a weight game, like a tap weight game for 4 months at one point, and I beat the entire thing without spending any money, and I wasn't even enjoying it by the end, but I was just determined to beat it without spending money.
So I remember when I described Love Nikki to you the first
Yeah.
time, Betsy, I think one of the things I said was, I don't feel like there's a paywall to this game. There's certainly times when you want to spend money because you want to keep playing, but it's not, I have to spend money to keep playing. It's, I want to keep playing, so I'll spend money.
Yeah.
Which I feel is a subtle distinction between how I felt playing like Candy Crush.
Like, I'd rather give up and stop playing than pay for this, because it's just become too much of a grind, basically.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, as you mentioned a couple of minutes ago, this game fosters a diversity of play styles, right?
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
a lot to do. So there is no single paywall in Nikki. I would instead suggest that maybe there are pay doors, which bar certain avenues of content and completion, but there's always doors open.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. Because, yeah, there are some things you just can't get unless you spend money. Very frequently, the, like, special event outfits where you're not going to collect all of them unless you're spending money. But you don't have to do the event. You don't have to collect those items. They'll come back eventually someday.
Yeah.
Come back to us, skeleton bro.
Yeah.
Like, I hope for Halloween.
Halloween? Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah,
spooky.
it dawned on me, I think, mid-August, and I was like, this game's gonna have a Halloween event.
Yes.
I'm gonna be so spooky.
But stop and think about that, though. Mid-August, you're already thinking ahead to October in a free game. Like, that
Like,
is...
we're all going to keep playing this game.
You're assuming that I don't generally think about Halloween most days.
I did make some unfair assumptions there. But it would be interesting to see if we follow up in 6 months' time how many of us are still playing. Because
Gothtober is my favorite time of the year, but every month is Gothtober to me.
I do notice that my play style is changing. I described it as slowing down a couple of hours ago, that I'm not trying to get through the stories,
Yeah.
but I'm still playing every day because now I've decided that the way I want to play is to finish outfits. I want to complete outfits. So now I
Yeah.
don't really care about the sort of narrative. So I was describing it as slowing down, but now that you've talked about your way of playing it, Chris, I think it's much more accurate to say that I'm just playing a different Love Nikki than I was playing a month ago. When I started playing this game, I was playing it to finish the acts. There are 10 acts, which are kind of like chapters in a story. So each act has a general theme, and then each level is like a different competition with a different player. And so when I started playing, that's how I would play. And then as you get into further levels, you have to complete specific outfits in order to finish the level. And I found that I really enjoyed much more the act of crafting an outfit than I did necessarily going through all the stories. So now that I'm done the sort of normal difficulty version of the acts that are published, I'm not as interested in going through it on the princess difficulty, which is the harder difficulty. I'm more interested in going into the gallery of outfits, picking an outfit I think looks cool, and finishing it, or picking one where I've collected some of the items.
Yeah.
And so that is how I would describe my game now.
I really like the player vote system, but I would say I am primarily interested in this game for the crafting purposes as well, which is why I have so many little bits and pieces of these outfits. And I did beat the whole thing on the higher difficulty because I needed some of those pieces to make some of those outfits, right? But I couldn't tell you what the story is.
So here's a pro tip that someone may have told me about getting through Princess without a lot of trouble. Basically, if you go into like maiden mode and go to Momo's advice and go to like this is what I want for the S rank or whatever, and so Momo just kind of on maiden mode, you can go to Momo for advice. Momo will just say, hey, I looked at all your items. These are the things you want to wear to get the highest score in this thing. And you can kind of throw that stuff on. It's not everything. You probably have a few other accessories you could add to that if you want to look really ridiculous, but also still get a higher score. And so you can do that on maiden, and then when you go to Princess, that advice is just absent. But if you go into maiden, you get different advice from Momo. You then go through and just absolutely destroy these earlier levels because they have a much lower score threshold. And then go into the Princess version of that level, and then basically go to memory and say, pick my outfit with the best score.
Yep.
Right.
And then it re-equips all that stuff without Momo's advice in Princess mode if you're having trouble getting through it that way.
It feels like cheating.
It does feel like cheating, but I like that you can break the game that way.
Like that's definitely how I did beat 1 through 10 in Princess mode, because I wanted to run through all of that, and I was less interested in making cohesive outfits. The other thing I think that's worth mentioning here is the various sort of outfit piece slots you have on Nikki. So you pick Nikki's hair, you pick a jacket, you pick a dress, you pick a shirt, you pick pants, you pick socks, you pick shoes. Then there's like 10 accessory slots. Like you can put on a cloak and a hat and
a veil
and a headband and some ears and a tail and some wings and your makeup and
skin.
I do
put on the flesh.
Put on skin. What did you? I know we were all already playing when they introduced a new skin, and when I say a new skin, I don't mean like you typically when you say there's a new skin available, you mean like a new outfit. But this whole game is about that. I mean, literally, you can go from being a very pale white woman to being a darker skinned person, and that comes with a set of a score increase, and it has different modifiers on it.
I mean, when it first came out, so there's an outfit that includes a darker skin tone, and when that outfit first came out, I saw it in other people using it, and I was really excited and really pleased to see a different skin color available. I'm not sure I would describe Nikki as white. I always thought of her as Chinese because of the way the game is set, I think, but definitely very pale skin. And so it was really cool to have this option for darker skin tone, but it became pretty clear that you can't use it in all outfits because it has the sort of associated characteristics of simple and lively. So the way the game works, it means that any outfit that requires a gorgeous or elegant theme, you cannot use that for without
detracting from your score.
Points.
But the implication there then is that the normal Nikki skin is gorgeous and elegant compared to simple and lively.
No, I would say the normal Nikki skin is standard, right? Is a blank, right? Which is how you know what a normative characteristic is, right? So it's not that I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm saying that in this case, what they've said is that light skin is the expected and accepted norm, and darker skin is an exceptional feature.
I think what makes it even more uncomfortable is the way they have it set up. The dark skin is something that you put on specifically to perform, right? Now, we'd be having a different conversation if an update was added so that you could customize your baseline avatar with unscored skin colors that were separate from the actual dress-up performance.
Yeah.
But the way it is now, I think there's only the one skin tone, and it's something that you put on. It's a temporary thing.
And if you put on that skin tone, you no longer have access to most of the makeup.
Well, you do. It's just
you then your face is
white.
Pale. Yeah.
And the rest of you is not. Or, I mean, there's only one darker skin makeup option.
Yeah. And you can put on the darker skin makeup option, and it looks a bit like she's wearing blackface, which is bad.
If you don't have the other option on, then it is literally blackface.
Yeah.
I would say
it's-
the whole thing is blackface.
Yeah, and the item names are whimsical enough that like I can absolutely see an incredibly over charitable reading of this saying, "Oh, it's just a tan," and yeah,
It is not.
I guarantee you someone would go to bat with that argument, and I don't think that that's really, I don't think that's a fair or like.
Well, no,
That's a lot- it's-
especially
you're reaching.
when no one else has, scare quotes, a tan in
Yeah.
the game.
Nobody
Right.
does. I mean, there's like the Cloud Empire is intended. I mean, and they flat out say like this is inspired by ancient China, modern China, and that's actually why I didn't read Nikki as Chinese because they
She's
made
not from the Cloud Empire.
exactly.
Yeah,
So
I
they
guess so.
specified this is Chinese and Nikki is not that. So that is why I was reading Nikki as white. She could be a great number of things, I suppose,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
she is ultimately a dress-up doll.
Yeah,
It's hard to like pinpoint exactly where these nations in the game, like if they do or don't map, but there are enough uncomfortable points of mapping where there are tags like British or Hindu or Chinese classical, kimono,
And Wasteland.
the wastelands.
The Wasteland is very clearly supposed to be a Native American
Yeah,
thing, and that, like, the name Wasteland is just a pretty horrible name for that.
yeah. Apple Federation is just supposed to be like generic dress-up outfits, like you're
I
a
assumed
cowgirl.
it was U.S.
Oh, maybe,
Yeah.
but I mean, like, there's a cowgirl and there's like
A cheerleader.
a cheerleader, and yeah, I just viewed it as like basic Halloween costumes. I don't know, but
no, I
I'm
read
also
that
American.
American.
I read that cheerleader
Oh, no.
outfit as extremely
Extremely.
U.S.
Okay,
American.
the cheerleading outfit was clearly an American 4th of July thing because it was released on American Independence Day.
Yeah.
And I mean, go figure, the American who's playing this game doesn't recognize the American stuff to be American. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh, these are Halloween costumes.
Yeah, so I think it's right. Apple is American of some sort. Pigeon Nation is
European.
European.
It's tagged as European,
European.
or British.
yeah, European or British, and then North is like
I don't
German, Russian. Feels like militaristic, cold.
It's very stereotypical in ways that are unfortunate.
But those stereotypes of the nations reminds me a lot about Hitalia, the anime where each character is a different nation. So there's like America and Russia, and
Yeah.
that's the character. And it's very much based in these stereotypes of what each nation is.
Yeah.
And the idea is that these aren't intended to be harmful stereotypes, but we all know that intent is not real. But it feels very much in line with that kind of text, with that kind of storytelling.
To me, it read very much like, we talked about this, I believe, in the Dragon Age podcast, where it's like England and Ferelden and Orlais and France, and, you know, like there are these real world parallels. I mean, you can make the same argument about World of Warcraft and the sorts of stereotypes that they're working with each of the races in the game. It's just they've replaced race with places instead of races, but it's the same. They're ultimately making the same points, I feel like.
Like, I wonder how much some of this is also just trickling down from actual fashion where,
Yeah.
you know, people are just like, hey, this is what the style is coming out of whatever, and trying to reference various historical periods and whatever.
Yeah.
That doesn't, I don't know that necessarily excuses Love Nikki from like inheriting those
Yeah.
similar problematics. It's just like, I don't know how much the devs are like, I feel like they're trying to negotiate some pretty weird territory, and
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Like I don't want to defend racism, obviously. But I also don't want to sort of excoriate these developers for participating in a pretty standard kind of stereotyping. So I don't have a problem with like North Kingdom and Pigeon. I do have a problem with the use of the word wasteland, but as anyone who's played Love Nikki also knows, very clearly not written by a person who speaks English.
Yeah. There are some interesting ways of wording things. And,
Like, I'm definitely playing a translation.
oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's fine. So I want to give a bit of leeway, but the thing with the skin, I think the idea of skin color as something you put on is pretty unpleasant, and I just use that skin whenever I can, and I vote for any outfit that has that skin.
I
Yeah.
do that too, yeah.
But it's still like, it's definitely so close.
yeah.
So close to doing it in an awesome way.
It's kind of a situation where like you're kind of damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Like
Yeah.
if you vote for it and you support it because you kind of want to encourage
Well,
that.
Yeah, I
but on
want
the-
to see more skin tones, but I
Right.
also don't want to see these skin tones in this game as performative.
Right. And then that's the thing is like there's no control over how the dev reads that.
Yep.
And they see that data and they're like, oh well, people just like it when there's more skins, so let's throw more skins in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh no, you missed. Okay.
Like I understand that they don't have a slider because it's a mobile game with a limited amount you can download, and the reality of it is that like they would have to have every makeup tone be basically transparent that goes over, instead of having just the face as a replaceable piece.
Yeah.
And that's a very different, more complicated set. It's not a good excuse to say that, you know, for technical reasons or for having limited memory or things like that, to not include the ability to have different skin tones off of the start, because you would have to redo all of the makeup. That's not a very good reason at all.
Well, and that's the reason that games have used to not have women, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's too hard to animate
Yeah.
women's bodies.
Exactly.
Do
yeah.
it.
Or like people of color's hair.
Yeah.
Like specifically black people's hair is because there's no impetus basically forcing developers to put money towards that. Like they're having enough trouble with white people's hair, so you're gonna have to wait. And it's like, this is a
Or-
terrible excuse.
That's a terrible
I
excuse.
played a bit of Covet Fashion, which is the other dress-up game that Elena Cole talked about, and the reason she brought it up and the reason I played it is because when she was writing about the game, they had different body types available as your base model and different skin tones. They've removed the body types, but the different skin tones are still available as the base model. I have definitely noticed in the brief amount of time that I've played it, though, that because the way Covet Fashion works is it's all audience votes competition.
Interesting.
So a lot of the outfits that I saw had pale skin, had white skin, but there are curly hair options, there's afro options, there's braids options. So it has a lot more diversity in that sense, but because your success is dependent on how many other people think your character is beautiful, I think there's probably cultural incentive to be as white as possible. So I'm playing it in blackface, and that makes me uncomfortable too, because, you know, I read that article about GIFs as blackface and this idea of race tourism, cyber tourism. That's a Nakamura book. So I feel deeply uncomfortable, but I also don't want to play the game as a white person. So I think it's, again, like you said, Rob, damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah.
But I mean, I will give points for trying. Did they try hard enough? I don't know.
When I was setting up my character for Tom Clancy's The Division, a game that for the first like act of it, you are straight up shooting people of color in hoodies who are like designated looters by your HUD, and you're a government agent. Yeah. And so I'm just like, well, I know they're getting data on the back end of this. I clearly don't want another grizzled white dude again. So picking a person of color, I'm just like, this data isn't really going to change anything. Like me doing this is like a very small gesture that doesn't really change anything. That game's politics are a mess. But
I mean, I understand the constraint of having Nikki. It has to be the same person. You can't have her change body types over time, but I do wish you could pick your Nikki. But then you have to deal with all the problems of the fashion world in general, which is that some outfits are only made to look good on very skinny figures.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of the outfits would look drastically different if Nikki were curvy, if she were fat, if she were shorter. But I mean, we allow this conceit of her hair changing dramatically. I mean, it's still a game about a fantasy world where everyone interacts through fashion fights.
Yep.
I wish we could change our Nikkis a little bit more.
let us change our Nickies.
I also wish you could do a little bit more with the kind of binary system they have set up on the clothes, like the categories that the clothes can be. God, what are it's simple versus gorgeous, lively versus elegant, cute versus mature, sexy versus pure. I particularly am ticked off about the sexy versus pure thing.
The part that's bewildering and kind of beautiful about that is that you only see 2 tags on a piece of clothing, but they have hidden stats beyond that that you either have to download a separate app on an Android that tells you more things about the items, or you just kind of figure it out by playing. And I think that's simultaneously frustrating and very compelling. But I want that wheel. I want that opposition wheel because I didn't realize that that's how that worked.
It took me a long time to learn that. But I think you're right. That's part of what makes Love Nikki so fun to play, is that you do have to learn those things. There's a lot that this game doesn't tell you.
Personally, when I've gone into a situation, I'm like, all right, I'm going to spitball this, see what I can do. When it actually turns out exceptionally well, I'm just like, all right, I'm killing it. I'm really good at this
Nailed
game.
it.
Yeah, which was, I desperately needed that when I was playing Subterfuge, sitting there going like, oh God, I'm in a game with a lot of people I respect and I'm doing terrible.
I would suggest this game is a good example if anyone wants to study flow ever again.
Oh.
Like, if anyone wants to do a close reading of a game based on flow, I think Love Nikki is a fantastic game because I never noticed that I was learning, and I never felt bad about not knowing it good enough.
I must concede that some of my most pleasurable early experiences were specifically demolishing my friends.
Yeah.
I am still going to get you on the quote unquote sassy challenge, which they wanted mature and sexy clothes for that challenge, and that was the one that Rob came at me for. And then Quips came at me, and I still can't beat you, Chris. It's gonna happen, but I mean that I must be okay at this because I'm beating my friend's score as you're playing early, but most of your friends have lower scores because they haven't gone back and like redone those older scores, right?
Yeah.
So when I started playing, I just saw like I think Elise your scores and Rob your scores and Alexandra's scores, and I was like, oh, I'm not bad at this because I'm doing at least as well as them. And then in the instances where I would pass one of you, I'd be like, I understand sassy.
Yeah. So what I also like about it is that it will give you like a percentage, like this is the percentile your outfit is in, which is like top 1%
And
percentile.
you're like, yeah.
Oh yeah. And then when that switches to actual numbers, like you're like number 1,000 out of however many, it's just like, I'm on to something.
Yeah, I think something I've said on this podcast a couple of times, I think, is this idea of like, I don't like really competitive games. And I think Love Nikki is just a really fantastic, like competitive, but not winning game.
Yeah.
Right. So it's competitive in that, I want to get a high score. I want to make my number. I want to pass my friends in the score list, but I don't feel ever like I'm losing the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the real strengths of Love Nikki.
There's the PvP arena, so to speak, and that one's judged by AI, and it's nice because it's not you doing it the same exact. It's asynchronous in its approach. So I'm not. Actually, I've never seen any of you in it because there's so many people to play against. Mm-hmm. But I know that I'm not playing them the same time that they're playing, and it feels a lot less antagonistic. Like it's competitive without being antagonistic, and I deeply appreciate that because I also don't like competitive games. I don't like winning by making someone else lose.
Yeah.
Right.
I also like that, like when you do the competition stuff, you can't see, to my knowledge, you can't see who you're compared against or who you're getting paired with. And I don't know if it's a random, these two people are paired against each other over a long period of time.
I think it might be pools because you often see people with similar levels of complexity in their outfits. You'll see people who have like the outfits you get in the first level paired up against each other.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Whereas you won't necessarily see someone with very basic clothing paired against someone who's bought their outfits. So I think there are pools, but you never get to see it.
Yeah, I wonder if they just aggregate the score and they just go, okay, this is kind of where roughly you should be compared against someone. But I don't know if it's like you were paired with that one person for the entirety of the competition.
Oh, yeah.
Or if it's you would have to.
I think it
you
is.
Are.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think it's good because it's a situation where I'm like, oh God, I'm not getting like this person's beating me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I can see my friends and I'm like, I'm just stoked that all of you are doing really well.
Yeah,
Like,
and I thumbs up you all, and I'm like, you're awesome. Yeah. But I'm glad I can't see who I'm competing against directly. Although when I've gotten into like the top 1% and 2% in competition, I'm like, who am I competing against? Like,
my partner figured out how to see who is the top of a competition.
Oh yeah, and
they're like, this is winning.
Yeah, I know. And then I get a little bit of salt.
You're right. That it is mostly winning without the losing part of it. Right?
Yeah.
Because you're never really on the receiving end of that kind of defeat.
Exactly.
And there's hundreds of levels. So despite the fact that I'm still crushing you in the sassy level, you have higher scores than me in the other 9 episodes of that chapter, right? So,
yeah. And I'm still going to beat you in that sassy score. So I guess as a way of kind of wrapping this up, do you think y'all are going to keep playing? I mean, I know you're going to play into October because we got to see that spookiness, but like...
Yeah, I don't...
What do you think?
I got my partner playing and they're boy howdy. I don't know.
I mean, we gotta thank your partner for all those wishes that they give us in the association.
Yeah.
Oh, one last thing. Is anyone reading the books in the association library?
I think
Not all
that's
of them.
just, I
Yeah.
spend all of my association currency on dyes to craft clothes, and you have to pay to read the
Yeah.
book. So I know you're reading them.
I'm reading the books. The books are good.
I'm enjoying. I haven't read a lot of them, but I'm enjoying them.
Yeah, it's just a nice weird little touch that I think is really cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm straight up through October. Probably I wouldn't be surprised to see myself just play through the holidays because it's a game that has kind of worked itself into my routine. In that it's a situation where like, oh, I'm super stressed out. I'm at like work or whatever. I'm going to take 10 minutes or whatever, check Love Nikki and kind of do whatever, do a couple things.
I've tried and failed to get into 5 separate mobile games after picking up Nikki, and this is the one that has the staying power, so I can only assume that I'll continue to play it for at least through October.
Yeah, I think as long as my friends are playing it, I will probably keep playing it. I think my play style will shift, but there's so many outfits to craft. I mean, until I get bored of that mechanic and there's nothing else to do, I mean, I think I'll keep playing it. I hope I learn some better restraint because I need to stop buying diamonds. Guys. This needs to stop.
Just make a pact.
Yeah.
I let myself buy $1 things like once a month. That's my rule. I can have
That's a
some
good rule.
things.
That's a good
I can
rule.
have some things, but I will admit on my birthday I definitely threw down $10 in one go. So
Well, I also like this cross-platform because I'm playing this on iOS and I
Yeah.
can still join the same association. Like it's not split
That's
that way.
awesome.
yeah, got some good points, got some bad points, but all in all, I think it's got the FPS thumbs up.
I really like that it's a dress-up game. I mean, I think we've talked about the dress-up, we've talked about that, and I mentioned the Elena Cole article, but I think it's really cool that this is a game that all my friends are playing that's a dress-up game, and I know my friends are weird, but
Yeah, they are
it's
kind of weird.
It's nice that I can, because I don't play a lot of the other games that you guys all play, and so it's really fun to play this silly, competitive, but not antagonistic, like you said, Betsy, and that it's a dress-up game and is so unabashedly girly, with the exception of Momo's weird sexual attraction to every woman. To just drop something at the end of the podcast that we're not going to talk about, there's lots of people who think that Nikki and Kimmy are gay for each other, and that makes me very happy because I felt it too.
Yeah, I can see that.
yeah.
I can definitely see that. Like, Nikki is so like into Kimmy. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and Kimmy's so into Nikki.
I know, I
it's
love her.
great. And the developer Facebook page is really welcoming of fan art. And whether it's that they're missing that some of this fan art is femslash or that they are excited about it, I don't know. But it's pretty great. So I like my gay little fashionista. It makes me very happy.
Thank you for listening to First Person Podcast. We would like to thank Neil Randall and the staff at the Games Institute for their support. We'd also like to thank Jason Lajoie, our podcast producer, Justin Carpenter, who supplies our equipment, and Stephen Trothan, who wrote and composed our theme.